Before we begin, take a second. If you believe that a single moment, one quiet, ordinary moment, can change everything you thought you understood about love, loyalty, and yourself, then make sure to subscribe to this channel. Because the stories you hear here, they aren't just stories. They're reflections of real moments. The kind that don't announce themselves, but leave a mark that never fades. Now let me tell you about a morning that started like any other and ended by quietly changing everything. Daniel Harper never imagined how fragile normal life really was. It's easy to believe that stability is permanent, that routines protect you, that the people you love will always be exactly where they're supposed to be. That morning in their Chicago home felt no different. The soft hum of the coffee machine filled the kitchen. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in thin golden lines, stretching across the counter. Emma stood by the sink, her hair loosely tied, wearing the same oversized sweater she always wore on slow mornings. She smiled, not the kind of smile people force for politeness, but the quiet, natural kind that only appears when life feels steady. Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching her. There was something comforting about moments like this. No urgencia, no tensión, no fear, just presence. Long day today? She asked, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Feels like it already, Daniel replied with a small laugh. She handed him the cup. Their fingers brushed, brief, familiar, unremarkable. 1,000 tiny moments like that had built their life together. And that's exactly why what happened next felt impossible. Because nothing warned him. Nothing prepared him. There was no dramatic music. No sign. No hesitation. Just a sound. Sharp. Sudden. Unnatural. The ceramic cup slipped from Emma's hand, shattering against the floor. And before Daniel could even process it, she collapsed. For a moment, time didn't speed up. It slowed down. Painfully slow. Daniel remembered the way her body hit the ground. The unnatural stillness. The way his own voice sounded unfamiliar as he called her name. Emma. No response. His heart began to pound, not fast, but heavy. Each beat filled with confusion. Then fear. Then something worse. Panic. The ambulance ride blurred into fragments of memory. Sirens. Cold air. Voices speaking in controlled urgency. Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand, trying to convince himself she would wake up. That this was temporary. That this wasn't real. But the hospital didn't treat it like something small. Doctors moved quickly. Nurses spoke in quiet tones. Machines began monitoring things Daniel didn't understand. And suddenly, everything that once felt stable didn't. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Daniel couldn't tell anymore. When the doctor finally spoke to him, his voice was calm, but careful. Too careful. Your wife is going to recover, he said. That sentence should have brought relief. And it did. For a second. But then came the rest. She's been under severe stress, physical exhaustion. It's taken a toll. Her body essentially forced a shutdown. Daniel nodded. But the words didn't fully land. Recovery. Rest. Monitoring. Time. A lot of time. More time than Daniel had ever imagined needing alone. That evening, Margaret Collins arrived. Emma's mother. She didn't rush in with panic. She didn't cry. She didn't overwhelm the room with emotion. She entered with something else entirely. Control. Quiet, steady control. Her presence changed the atmosphere immediately. She hugged Daniel briefly, firm, grounding. Then stepped back and began asking questions. Clear ones. Practical ones. The kind Daniel hadn't even thought to ask. What's her current condition? What medications have they administered? What's the expected recovery timeline? Daniel stood there, listening. Grateful. Because for the first time since that morning, someone else seemed strong enough to hold everything together. While Daniel sat beside Emma's hospital bed, feeling completely powerless, Margaret moved through the system like she had done this before. Paperwork was handled. Doctors were consulted. Details were tracked. Nothing was missed. And Daniel let her. Because he needed to. Because strength at that moment didn't exist inside him. Within days, everything changed. Margaret moved into their home. At first it felt temporary. Necessary. Logical. Emma needed time in the hospital. Daniel couldn't manage everything alone. So Margaret filled the gap. And in the beginning, he was thankful. The house remained clean. Not just tidy, but organized. Meals appeared without effort. Bills were sorted neatly into labeled folders. Small things Daniel never noticed before were suddenly handled without question. After long days at work, followed by emotionally draining hospital visits, he would return home expecting emptiness, silence. But instead, there was warmth, light in the kitchen, the quiet clink of dishes, the smell of food already prepared, and Margaret, asking gently, "How is she today?" At first, their conversations were simple. Updates, logistics, information. But slowly, without either of them noticing, they began to expand into stories, memories, observations about life. Margaret had a way of listening that made people feel heard, not judged, not interrupted, just understood. And Daniel, who had been holding everything inside, started talking. Weeks passed. Emma's recovery was slow, painfully slow. She was conscious, aware, but weak. Conversations were short. Her energy faded quickly. And every time Daniel left the hospital, he felt something follow him. Loneliness. Not loud, not overwhelming, just constant, like a shadow that didn't disappear. At home, Margaret filled that silence. Not intentionally, not in a way that crossed lines, but in a way that made life easier. Too easy. One evening, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain struck the windows. The lights flickered, then went out. The house fell into darkness. Margaret Liconde placed them carefully around the room. Soft light replaced electricity, and for a moment, everything slowed down again. They sat across from each other. No television, no phones, just silence, and the sound of rain. Then Margaret spoke. Not about logistics, not about the hospital, but about Emma. As a child, her stubbornness, her kindness, her determination. Daniel listened, and for the first time in weeks, he laughed. Genuinely. It surprised him that he was even capable of it. But the feeling didn't stay simple, because right after came something else. Guilt. A quiet, uncomfortable realization. Why did this moment feel calm? When Emma was still lying in a hospital bed, why did relief feel wrong? Margaret noticed. She always noticed. "You're allowed to breathe," she said softly. "Caring for someone doesn't mean you stop being human." Her words stayed with him, long after the candles burned low, long after the storm ended, because they weren't just comforting. They were true. And that's when things began to change. Not visibly, not dramatically, but internally, subtly, dangerously. Daniel didn't realize when reliance began. He didn't notice the exact moment it shifted from appreciation to dependence. But it did, because Margaret became the person who steadied him, who understood without explanation, who filled the silence that Emma's absence created. And that's the part no one talks about. How emotional lines don't break all at once. They blur. Slowly, quietly, until one day, you look back and realize you're closer to something you never intended to approach.